I'm actually myself. I'm gonna start a project to try to learn to draw a bit because that has been my. I mean, I am useless at drawing, but I really I went and growing up, I always thought that it was a talent and it would be impossible to learn. So I'm a
Hmm.
bit intrigued to see what I can actually, if I can. I mean, even if I don't get good at it, I want to see if it's actually
Hmm.
possible to improve.
You know what I think nowadays? I know what you're saying about a talent. I think the real talent is determination.
Yeah,
You just want to do it so bad, and what you want to do is the talent.
yeah. I think you're absolutely right.
Vi är spelskaparna.
Välkommen till Spelskaparna, podcasten om personerna bakom spelen. Förra gången var det alltså Extraliv som gästade här i Spelskaparna-flödet. Och nu finns det fler avsnitt. Så om ni inte redan gjort det så får ni hemskt gärna gå in och följa Extraliv podcast i den podcastappen som ni använder. Och ni får gärna också följa Extraliv på Instagram. Men nu tycker vi tar och lyssna på Gabriel Santos historia om ASCII-spelet Stone Story RPG.
Hey, I'm Gabriel Santos. I've been making games for about 15 years, mostly mobile games. I did a few PC games as well. But Stone Story is my first indie game that I'm really invested in. That I've been working on that for 4 years now. As a developer, my goal is to learn everything about game development. I started on the programming side, but through the years, I've moved through game design and started doing art and picked up business and marketing skills as well. So Stone Story RPG, it's set in this dark world. It's very ominous, and in the beginning feels has a sense of solitude and but also peacefulness to some extent. It's very chill. And the story is that you're collecting these 9 magic soul stones in order to restore light to the world. I guess that's the story. Very simple narrative, but you meet some interesting NPCs on the way. I try to make them funny in some cases. There's also an expansive crafting system where you collect a lot of loot that you find along the way, and you can use these items, even if they're, you know how in RPGs you sometimes find a lot of the same common item again and again, and you just sell that to the store, right?
Yep.
So in Stone Story, you can't sell the items to the store, but you can use them in the crafting to make more powerful items. And there's always going to be some use for the common stuff. Maybe even if not right now, but later you'll definitely use it. You'll use all your gear.
Okay. Can you tell me about when the project you were working on before Stone Story RPG got cancelled and how it felt to abandon something that you have worked a lot on?
Yeah, prior to Stone Story, I was working on a rail shooter that wasn't doing very well. The project was interesting, but we decided to do a Kickstarter, and that failed around 2013, something like that. And when you put a lot of energy into something and it fails, it's very disappointing. The team, very quickly fell apart, and each person went their own way. But I've made it a point for myself to always have the next project lined up. I don't want to fall into that into that void of time where you're doing nothing. So I was already studying ASCII as an art form before the Kickstarter for the previous project.
Could you tell me what ASCII art is?
ASCII art really came out became developed in the 90s, early 90s, because it was difficult to send images over the internet back then. People with limited bandwidth got creative and would send images composed just of text characters, so just regular symbols on your keyboard, and people would draw little doodles or do very complex things and send it to each other back then.
And how big could those images be? Just so the listener can get a picture.
Yeah, I mean, you could make to fill the screen. I'm not sure what's the maximum size that people used back then, but it could get as big as 100 characters wide and 30 high would be the maximum to fit the screen.
And sorry, what did you say about how this project started off? You started to get into ASCII art and so on.
Yeah, I stumbled upon some really high quality ASCII art from back in the day, especially from this artist called Joanne Stark, and I really loved her style. And I started studying her style and sort of emulating it. And after 1 year of sort of doing that as a hobby, I started to develop my own style. And there were some aspects of ASCII art that I felt could be really improved, could be developed, and that it was an art form that was abandoned because, once you start getting pretty graphics and you go into 3D games and stuff like that, people start getting excited about photorealism, and it's only really with the indie renaissance that we're having now that it's possible to go back and consider a serious project, using a style that's so antiquated. And I wanted to show that it's an art form that still has room to be developed. You'll find it in other games like Dwarf Fortress, for example, is a famous ASCII art game. But in that game, it's used more for delivering data. You get the geography and all the gameplay information and stuff. Whereas I'm interested more in the aesthetic side of the content. I think it's got a lot of potential there, especially with animation and modern techniques, particle systems, stuff like that you can that really didn't exist before. So that's some innovations that I'm bringing.
How did you come up with the idea of actually making ASCII art animations? Because it seems, from the outside, that seems like a impossible feat.
Well, I studied classic animation a long time ago when I was a teenager. Just pencil and paper, right? Animation, and while I was researching the archives, the ASCII art archives, I did find some of Joanne Stark's work were animations, and it was just a few frames. For example, there's this one where it's an egg that cracks open, and there's a dragon that comes out of the egg, and it's probably like 12 frames long. And I wrote a little program to render those frames out and flip through them, and started getting ideas of how I would, and create my own animations and stuff like that. I think one of the turning points for the project was when I was interested in the minimalism of it all, and I decided how small could I make a person, right, that is still recognizable as a person, and that ultimately became the protagonist of the game. I wanted to see how do I make him walk, how do I make him throw things, and this was before I even had the idea for the game. I was doing small stick figure, if you will, animations of the main character.
Could you describe what the main character consists of? I mean, it's really visual if you see it, but so the
Yeah,
listener
it's
can
just the
understand.
letter O. The letter O has a overloaded symbology in the game. It symbolizes the stone, and I use that for the head of the character, and then it's just a few slashes for the arms and the legs. So forward slashes and back slashes, and then one vertical one for the body. So 6 symbols total, very small.
And to animate him, what kind of other tricks have you used?
For the animation process, I do everything in plain text. I just copy paste. So I draw keyframes, right? So poses of the characters in specific keyframes, and then I copy paste to interpolate in between to do the tweening, and just adjust some of the symbols in between. And when you render it out, you get the animation. Tricks the eye. Back in the beginning when I was starting, I would just scroll the scroll wheel very fast, and it would flip the frames on the screen fast enough that you could see that. If you get the speed of the scroll wheel correct, you could see the animation. That was the early days.
Yeah, that's a really simple way, but fast, and you get results fast.
Yeah. Oh, what it looks like as a description is you see the animation frames vertically on the text file, right? So frame by frame below each other. It's convenient in some respects to use simple text, plain text. I can use find and replace functionality for quickly swapping a feature of the character I'm animating.
Interesting. Yeah, that's clever. But if we are now like chronologically, we are now at those early days of this project. Did you have any other work on the side at this point?
Okay, I was working full time on Stone Story for about 9 months, and originally the idea was to make a game that I could have finished maybe in a year or a year and a half tops. I don't usually like very long projects, but when I started showing the game to people, the first prototype I had, people were really what really surprised people was the visual style that was so novel, and people really loved the animations. And that's one of the truths about marketing. You don't really know what people are going to want from the product until you start showing it to a bunch of people. So when that happened, I realized that this couldn't be a 1 year project anymore, and that it was going to take quite much longer if I were to complete it. So I decided to find another project to pay the bills while I part time worked on Stone Story, and it's sort of been that way since.
Okay, and could you paint a picture of your routine of a typical day working on Stone Story?
Sure. Yeah. So I usually wake up and check the Discord channel. So I have an official Discord channel for the game, which is great for communicating with the fans and the players. Even though the game's not out yet, there's already a lot of people who are interested and want to follow the development and have suggestions and stuff like that. And I like to communicate directly with them. So in the morning, I'll check to see if anybody new has joined the server, to answer any questions, stuff like that. And then, well, just this morning there was a bug, and one of the beta testers had found something, and I was already started working really early. But then I gotta, get ready to go to the office, right? So I go to the office on my other project, and I work there for about 7 hours, and then when I get back home, I'll have dinner, and then start working on Snow Story again. Often until very late. And then on the weekends, I'll usually spend my focus time on Stone Story as well. So about uh, 8 hour, 9 hour days on the weekend.
And what part of the development this far have been most satisfying? Do you remember any specific moment?
It's always fun to show the game to people and observe them play and sort of see which assumptions as developer or which assumptions were right and which were wrong, and try to figure out places for improvement. In terms of the day-to-day development, the most fun is doing the animations, which is great because it's the main selling point of the game, I guess. And I have a lot of fun making those, coming up with new characters or trying to make some of the boss fights more expressive or something like that. Unfortunately, there always ends up being other stuff that I have to do, like marketing or business stuff that's boring. I always want to get back to the animations as soon as possible.
But don't you ever feel that you want to cheat with animations? I mean, that you can sometimes be like, it must be hard sometimes to get it to work since you're so limited to what you can actually make.
I think the constraint really is good for the project. Um, I would want to create a new tool for the future, not for this project. I think it's a bit too late, but I want to make a tool to make especially the coloring process. That's the main pain point right now, and I decided to make the game black and white for that reason. It's got some color in it, but it's mostly black and white, and that's a constraint of the tools that I use because you can't color a plain text file, right? Um, so I've built the lore of the game and everything around that as well. It's a dark world. Uh, it's it's dull, but the things that are colored in it denote more importance. A specific point of interest or something magical or something that has color in it, right?
But do you remember the first time you actually showed Stone Story to the world and what their reaction was?
I started very slowly. I always have some friends that I show to first. I have some game designer friends that understand, what I'm trying to do, and those were the first people that I showed it to. Got feedback. I have like a cousin or something. I send it to them too to get a more gamer perspective as well. And then I, the first time I showed it to a lot of people was at Indiecade, 2016, where the game qualified as a finalist in the competition. And I think a little over 200 people saw it, and by observing them and also feedback from some people who really got what I was trying to do and were able to identify problems. Uh, I remember this one girl that nailed it. She was like, "Yeah, you don't control the main character directly. Why is the weapon? Why is the item automatically swapping? Things like that, like questions that players would ask and would help fill in some of the gaps in the design. It was a very important milestone for the project. Indicate.
When you have been working on this, you've been doing it alone, and you've been working on a lot of other game projects where you've been many people. What has been the
Yeah.
biggest difference for you, like to working alone?
The main difficulty with working by yourself on a game, or I guess any creative process for that matter, is that you don't have anyone to discuss the ideas with, right? Sometimes you just need someone to brainstorm ideas with, and to do that by yourself, that's difficult. I think that's also one of the reasons why I decided to do Stone Story as a part time project, because it needs more time to think. Like the ideas need more time to sink in and mature. When you're on a schedule full time, like you don't have time to think. You're just working nonstop, and that can really hurt the creative potential of the game. So it's great to have multiple projects for that reason, and especially other projects with other developers. And you're learning from the other developers as well, and indirectly that's feeding back into the project that you're passionate about.
But what are some of the benefits of doing it by yourself?
The benefit is, well, you have creative control, which is important. I think a lot of times things get decided by committee, and that's not good. Sometimes it's good if you trust and you have experience working with the people you're working with. But even then, sometimes you'll just do something because it's safe, or if you have that's also true if you have a budget, right? If it's an expensive project or it has a deadline, you're gonna fall back to things that are safe, right? Because you need to finish the project as fast as possible, essentially. But if you're by yourself and you're able to take your time to reflect on the ideas, then you can really do something different, right? You're given the space to try something different that is also reflective of your personality. It's very personal.
In what way do you think Stone Story is personal to you?
Well, when I was young, I had lots of nightmares, very bad nightmares, about very dark stuff, and that attracted me to literature about that. So I would read, Dante's Divine Comedy and other stuff like that, and that is definitely present in the game, for sure. Even though I've matured past that point a long time ago, that's why it's a dark world,
And also, the aesthetics is also. I mean that's the theme, but I guess it's also personal. Or do you think that a game like Stone Story could ever have been made in like a big studio?
No, I don't think so. I think that's also true about bigger games like Minecraft, for example. You could never pitch that idea to a big studio. Like it would never fly. And so many games are like that. You need a small team or just one person to really champion the idea when it's something different.
To make to make something truly unique, and that is, like, from a business perspective, extremely risky as well.
Yeah.
Then it helps you to be as few as possible.
Yep, that's true. Unless you have a very sometimes when you have a very trusted developer, somebody who has a fan following, for example, then you can justify the business side a bit more because you already have that free marketing boost of the personality behind the project. Then you can take a bit more risk. You can trust that person. He's done many games, right?
Yep, makes sense.
You have some Japanese developers that are, for example, going that route.
Yeah, I'm really curious to see what happens with the Kojima project. It seems insane.
Mm-hmm. That can also get out of hand, right? Like perhaps that person has never had that sort of development freedom before, and their schedule could completely blow up.
Yeah, I have this thing with when it comes to artists within any field. It can be music, it can be movies, it can be games. That there are some people that are very free spirits, and for my taste, at least, the best things they do is when they get some constraints. Because if they get the full freedom, then it gets too weird for me. Like,
Yeah. Constraints are good for the creative process, I think.
Yeah.
just in
As an
general.
example, I think like I didn't really enjoy the latest Twin Peaks season as much as the original, and I think he got David Lynch got like totally freedom. It feels like, at least, for this last season.
Yeah, that can be a curse in disguise as well. But I think in my case, I'm very production oriented from my many years working in studios, both small and big, and I've been involved in the strategic planning of the production for a lot of games, so I'm able to apply that to my indie projects as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's an issue for you at all. I was wondering, since you have been doing so much ASCII art, when you walk around in everyday life, do you like see things, objects, and think of them like, how would this look in ASCII?
Sometimes I've had a couple of dreams in ASCII. That was weird, where everything is text. I couldn't remember what happened, but then I drew an animation of some sheep jumping over a fence in ASCII, of course.
It's fun.
And yeah, sometimes I think though Portal really got me there. After I played Portal 2, I was walking the dog and I saw a patch of white paint, and I'm like, oh wait, I could throw a portal there.
Yeah. But what do you think now? I mean, it's you're in beta and getting closer to release. What's your feeling? Usually, you when I interview people, you hear the story of when it released, and if it was a success or not. What are your anticipations at this point?
I worry a bit about myself. I read things like Joachim Sandberg of the Iconoclasts. Do you know him?
I know about him, but I haven't actually
Yeah,
met or
so
talked to
he
him.
was saying that he had a breakdown after he released the game because he spent so much time working on it by himself. So I do get worried about that, even though I have a lot of experience with development. I've never spent so much time by myself making a game, so I am cautious about that aspect of the release. But currently, I'm just trying to hit it one objective at a time and just pacing myself if I can. Getting the features that are missing in and doing the content, doing the marketing, all that stuff, just one step at a time. I have a task list that's the size of a train, essentially, and just working through it one item at a time.
How do you go about doing marketing by yourself?
So parts of that is the assets. So you're doing like little capsule images for Steam page, and there's like 20 different ones. There's business cards. Right now, I need to order buttons. What do you call it with the little pins? Yeah, like a pin button for packs.
Yep.
I want to order a bunch of those to give out because they're not allowing stickers anymore, unfortunately.
Okay,
People were putting
why?
stickers all over the walls.
Okay, of course, yeah.
So they banned stickers, which is sad because I designed a really awesome sticker for. It fits perfectly on the back of the laptop. But yeah, so that's sort of marketing material. But there's also the PR side, sending to journalists and stuff. And I consider everything marketing, so everything that communicates with the customer. So the Discord channel is a piece of the marketing equation that I take seriously, and I gotta keep checking on that all the time and making sure it's okay, doing tweaks to it, doing tests as well, trying to figure out, because it's a very new platform, so I'm trying to figure out what are the optimal ways to make sure the players are happy, essentially. There's every week doing posts on Twitter, on Instagram, that sort of thing, right? Just keeping the beats going. There's been some Twitch streams as well that I've watched and helped the streamers.
It's a kind of new, or I mean, it's been around for the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years. But that before, marketing was all about post-release. But almost everything you have told me now is during development.
Yeah. Development marketing is so important now because the market is so saturated with content, right? There's every day dozens of new games come out, maybe even hundreds across all the different platforms. So making sure that people even know you exist at all is a challenge now, is a huge challenge. Even for a publisher, even for a big company, just being known at all is very difficult.
So making something unique and personal might be even more important today.
I think so. I think it's important to stand out from the first step, from the first moment. Being instantly recognizable definitely helps. If you're just one more top-down strategy game, then it just looks the same. Everyone's already played League of Legends, right?
Yeah, for sure. But if getting a bit cautious about what's going to happen when you release and all of that, but if you get to dream, what would be your happiest vision of the releasing Stone Story?
Well, there is a minimum number of copies that I would be very happy to reach. I'm not sure. I guess if I sell 100,000 copies, I'm happy. That's my dream. That's good enough. This project is a lot more about the game for me than it is about the monetary success. It's like we said, it's very personal. It's about the game itself, and I'm just happy to make it and have people play it. I would like to continue developing it for at least a year after release, and then I want to pivot to a couple of other projects that I have in mind. So that would be the dream, I think, is just to keep going to make more games.
Because we've talked a lot about the aesthetics of the game, but the mechanics are also quite unique. And you have talked about it a little bit, but could you describe how you control the player in the game?
Sure. One of the unique mechanics in Stone Story is that you don't control the character directly. There's an artificial intelligence that does all the microing, right, so to speak, all the controlling of the main character. And the motivation behind that is because I've always liked MMOs and RPGs to a certain extent, but I never really enjoyed the grinding part where I have to, kill one more wolf or whatever, collect 20 pelts, right? I don't want to do that. And you get people who write bots. People write bots to automate that stuff, and then the companies, they try to ban the bots, but they can't really ban the bots. And I figured, you know what? Why don't I just write a bot for the player? That way, they won't want to write a bot themselves. You'll get a bot out of the box. And part of the development has been that focus. And whenever somebody automates a part of the game, I go and I expand on the bot and I add that. Like, for example, the last part I did was the treasure opening. So this one guy, he collected hundreds of treasure chests, but he just wouldn't open them all. He would never open the treasure. So he wrote a script that would click through all the treasures to open them all. And I'm like, okay, I'll write a script that opens all the treasures. Easy.
So you can all the players get that luxury.
Yeah, exactly. And I really wanted the gameplay experience to focus on the progression and the decisions that matter, and not the moving around and clicking. Right. So you have to decide what items you're going to equip, and what quests are you going to do. Right. What locations of the world are you going to go to next? Um, and then the artificial intelligence does the rest. It does all the fighting, the looting, everything automatically. But you can step in and swap an item or something at any time. And I think a lot of the game has turned out, because of that. The game turns out very different, right? The game design warps towards that, um, in favor of that, so to speak.
Cool. And I'm really looking forward to see what happens when you actually release. Have you set a release date?
There's no exact release date yet. I'm trying to target early next year. There's still some content that needs to be done, but it's getting there.
Okay, exciting. I want to talk a little bit about. I got to know that you have actually worked for a while in Finland.
Mm-hmm.
How did that come about?
So at the time, I think it was 2007. I was in Brazil. I was working in a startup in Brazil, and there was this studio in Helsinki that was doing something really similar. And I really wanted to move out of Brazil. I wasn't happy with the quality of life there, and it was time for a change. So I went to Helsinki to work making mobile games. So when I got there, it was this studio called Sumea, and it was very production oriented. Great quality developers there. I still have lots of friends from that time. Digital Chocolate was a startup from the United States who had just acquired this studio in Helsinki, and injected a lot of money, and told them, hire more people, right? But at the time in Helsinki, Nokia was very big, and there's not that many people in Finland, right? And they did a global search for talent, and there was people from all over the place, from all over Europe, South America, Africa, Australia, you name it. There was people there. So it was in this mix of multi-talented people that I think I really learned a lot at that time. It was a very productive 3 years. I think I made 10 games in that time. So really productive.
And for what platforms did you work on back then?
Mostly mobile before iPhone, about half of them. And then when iPhone came out in 2008, it really changed a lot of things. And we pivoted to that. I did a few of those touchscreen games. And then Facebook came around, and I did a few Facebook games. That's pretty much it.
And this company, you told me that later on they evolved into something else.
Oh yeah. So Sumea was interesting because if you look at the success stories on mobile, you'll see that a lot of the people were from Sumea, and around the time I was there, and because Digital Chocolate went bankrupt. After that happened, a lot of the developers started Supercell, which is a huge success now. So just a lot of the same people. And some of the other people, for example, a couple of guys I know went back to Russia. They were Russians, and they started their own game company, and they did great. That's Zeptolab. And you get the same story, people who were from Sumia and went somewhere else and did great. Just because we were so ahead of the development there, of the development culture. We were at the very edge when the iPhone came out.
What things in the culture do you think that people took from Sumia and brought to all of these other successes?
That's a great question. I think the main thing is the production style and team structure. So a focus on small teams and on really identifying the role of the game designer, which in lots of studios, the game design responsibility here in the US, for example, was of the producer or whatnot, something like that. But in Sumia, there was the very specific game designer role. And while not unique, that's an important aspect of the culture there. There was no game design school back then, right? Like there is now.
So how would you describe the Sumia style game designer? I mean, the role of it.
Yeah, their role was to really be responsible for the vision of the game and to work with the programmers and the artists to prototype first. So one of the interesting things there was that you would always get one game designer, one artist, a lead artist, and a lead programmer together. That was the trio that would start the project. And then if the project gets past the prototyping phase and goes into production, then the studio would reallocate people from other projects that were coming off. So we had multiple games in parallel, like 4, 5, 6 games being made simultaneously in the studio. And so when one game was ramping down, another one was ramping up, and there was a lead game designer, a lead programmer, and a lead artist for the studio, and their job was to not only help with the projects, but to manage the people moving from project to project. It was very efficient maneuvering of developers between games, and that's why I was able to make so many games in just 3 years, just 3.5 years, because when one project was ramping down, you go to do something else already. You start another one, right?
That is exactly what you said about how you want to work now. That you want to.
I think I've maintained that culture. I've got 3 game design ideas ready to go right now. I just don't have time to make them. I would love to make them, and that's one of my motivations for finishing Stone Story. Is like I've got these 3 awesome games that I want to make, and I just can't.
But how do you, if you look at it in a really long perspective, do you ever want it to end, or do you think you want to keep continuing mashing out games?
I think I'm just going to keep going forever. Yeah, until I die someday.
It sounds like a good plan, a lifelong plan.
Although the saddest part will be that last game that doesn't get completed. That's going to suck.
That last game has to be something really epic.
Or really bad, Why did I die, right? Maybe it was awful. The game was so bad it killed him.
But what did you think about if we take the culture differences question?
Mm-hmm.
You come from America and you.
Oh yeah, here in the U.S. there's this serious problem. One of the most important parts I mentioned, which is the willingness and ability to move the developers around between projects. That's a problem here. You come originally from a culture of boom and bust of studios where you have these big layoffs and these big hiring sprees and stuff like that. That's terrible for the developers, right? But it's also bad for the studio. Then you also have other studios which have another problem where they're so reluctant to let go of the developers because you have great people doing efficient work. So you hoard the developers, and you end up with more people on the project than you really need. And it is really detrimental for the game in a lot of cases. So you have the 2 extreme ways of running a studio here in the U.S., and they're both bad. I think. I think the Finland has the better way.
It is, as you say, that a lot of people from that company went to start other companies all around the world, because I've, at least in Sweden, it seems like the past couple of 5 years or something like that, it's been very common to work in a similar fashion as you described. I know King does something really similar, and other companies as well.
I bet if we kept talking, we would find some people who worked at Sumia.
Yeah, that's
I'm
probably.
pretty sure.
Yeah. Let's move on to the segment under the magnifying glass. I asked you to choose a game, and you chose Warcraft 2, and I wonder why.
Well, when that game came out, the internet was just beginning, right? And that was the first real multiplayer PvP game for me, and I think for a lot of people, for some people, it would be Quake, I guess, from the first-person shooter genre, but otherwise, Warcraft 2 or StarCraft, which came after. I really love PvP games. I love the competition. I still play a lot of PvP games now. I think that's the main reason. That game made a big impression on me. Just the ability to play a game in real time with somebody from across the world.
Yeah.
There's something special about that still.
Was there something else with Warcraft, or could it have been around another theme or even another gameplay? Was the important part that you challenge another human?
I've always been into sports, especially when I was younger. Playing sports, particularly, not as a spectator so much, but and it is a sport. We have now the concept of an esport, right? That didn't exist back then, but it was already an esport, and I think that's what attracted it for me. It's just the way you play. It's a fast paced, action oriented, multitasking, microing. Your brain is just completely overloaded at full capacity when you're playing a game like that. I love it.
I read something interesting you wrote on Twitter, and that is and an intro to that is could you describe what is a Skinner box?
Skinner box is a laboratory experiment for testing conditioning and behavioral training, often done with rodents or birds, but you can do it with people too. And it usually involves a very limited set of inputs and outputs or stimulus, like a light flashing or something like that, and then there's a button, and the animal presses the button, and then when the light flashes, and then they get a piece of food or something like that. So that's one example of a Skinner box. Yeah, so what I wrote on Twitter was a thought exercise that I had been doing for a while, for several weeks. When Belgium outlawed loot boxes in games, it really made me think, why did they do that? Because I like to be realistic about things. A lot of people's knee-jerk reaction is to be defensive and be like, hey, we're just making games. Like, why are you changing the rules? I don't care about that so much. I want to understand why things are the way they are. So I started thinking about that. And then before that, there was, in China, related to loot boxes as well, they require apps to list the probability of drops when you're buying a loot item. So I took all that together and started thinking about the process of players engaging with systems like that, And I came to some interesting conclusions that all games are essentially gambling. Even a deterministic game like chess boils down to chance and to unpredictability. And there's two key pieces for that. One is the variable outcome that you get from a match, or for example, in a competitive game. Let's continue with the chess analogy. When you start a game, you don't know if you're going to win or lose. If you're playing online, like you don't know who your opponent is going to be, what they're going to say in the chat, how many points, how many rank points you're going to gain or lose in that match. You don't know those things. So that's a set of a variable outcome, and it's unpredictable. That's the second part. So you have variable value and you have a unpredictable outcome. And something else in this thought process that surprised me was with the medical definition of gambling addiction is defined in relationship to money, to spending money on gambling. And legal definitions are also revolve around spending money. But as a game designer, I know that games can define value in any way. Money is not important for gambling addiction. And that's why you now have a new definition for video game addiction in the medical book, which is being criticized because it's separate from the gambling addiction. And I think it's the same thing, because the game just defines value in different ways, right? I can define this loot box as having value, and as a player, after playing the game enough, you start to understand how much value that item has, right, in relationship to the rest, like how much time it's worth for you and that sort of thing, the trade-offs, right, in value.
But if you think it's like that, do you think that you as a game developer have more responsibility?
I do think there's a moral responsibility first to understand these things, right? I feel like we're still at the point where we don't quite understand that yet. So we need to do a better job first of understanding. There's clearly some thresholds where we could draw some lines, right? So money being one of them. If a game mechanic involves spending money, perhaps we could limit that to by the age of the person, right? We could say, in my mind, it would be 23 years old because of the mental development. If you're exposing, because that's such an easy way to define value, right? Using money is just a very convenient shortcut for value. Yep. But it's also detrimental to the person's real life, right? If they have addiction problems, you're causing an impact on their life, and that's not good. So I feel like somebody who's 23 years old, knows what they're doing, and that should be allowed. But there are other thresholds, perhaps, that we need to study that would fall into other age groups. And if we were empowered with that knowledge and that was respected as the norm, then I could create my game with that knowledge in mind. Here are the mechanics, and if you're a certain age, you get access to these mechanics, right?
Oh.
I think that would be better for everybody. But it needs more research, I think, first of all.
What do you think about there is a kind of dilemma for a game developer that there is this kind of addiction, and usually when it comes to free to play, it's regular that the company who has made a game makes most of their money from a small percentage of all the players.
Right.
And those players are usually the ones who are most active and play the most, which could be the same symptoms as someone who is addicted. It doesn't have to be, but I mean, they are the same at least. And
Yeah,
that is
it
something you
can
need.
be even worse, I think, with a video game because we're so good at making fun experiences, right? Um, and we're still improving. We're still making games that are better and better. So it can get worse, I think, than a traditional games of chance, so to speak.
Yeah.
Personally, um, I'm not a fan of making games like that. I think that there is there is room for free to play that can be done respectfully. I think a game that's a good example of that is Clash Royale. Clash Royale does a good job instead of taking tens of thousands of dollars out of a few players. They do a better job of taking $30 out of everybody, right? And it's a very good game. It's a fun game. It's fair in many respects. It's not a pay to win game. But I don't think the process, like obviously being addicted is not nice, but the process that leads to that is a very natural process. I think that it's just part of what makes us human, how we interact with unpredictable things in the real world are reflected in the video games, because that's what fun is in a certain way. You have a system that you don't understand how it works, and you make experiments, and the outcomes at first seem random, but then you start to understand the system, and you're able to improve the pattern, so to speak. You're mastering the pattern of that system and making it less random and improving your outcomes, right? Your positive outcomes. That's just any video game. The problem with and that's the real world too. So that's what makes us human, I think, in our relationship to games. Um, the problem with pure gambling games, let's say roulette, for example, is that the emotional side of the brain that's trying to do that optimization for positive outcome is not able to optimize it because roulette is purely random. So you can become addicted to that because you're trying to optimize it, but you're not able to. You're not able to figure out the pattern. The only way to increase your positive rewards is to play more. That's the only way to get better rewards is to
Yeah,
keep playing.
because the players have like false models of how it works. I have my lucky number and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And there are a lot of like models that are false within gambling. People have
I,
all
th-
these strange structures of how they think it works.
I think that's what ties it back to the Skinner box. There's a famous there's a famous experiment where the food there's a lever and the rat pulls the lever and the food doesn't always drop. It's random, so it's a game of chance for the rodent. And he just keeps pulling the lever as fast as he can because um, that's the way to optimize it. So he's figured out the system. He just keeps pulling it. So that's the addiction part. When I was a kid, I saw in the museum, like a technology museum, I saw some mice playing basketball, right? And that was really cute. And everybody looks at that and thinks, "Oh wow, that's so cool! The mice are playing basketball." But it's the same thing as a metal Skinner box. It just looks cute, right? Because it's been humanized, so to speak. Um, and that's what games are. I think they're just all systems of unpredictable outcome, but some are more humane than others.
Yeah. Interesting thoughts. I think I only have my two standard questions left. And the first one is how can people follow you?
You can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Standard Combo. I'm on Instagram, if that's your preferred social network. Or on my Discord server. Anybody is welcome to join. It's stonestoryrpg.com/Discord.
Perfect. And this is also a question that I ask every time in this show, and that is, who do you think I should interview next time?
There are so many indie devs. I could send you somebody from PAX.
Sure. So you'll come back with a name? Is that...
Yeah, I promise.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks a lot for your time, Gabriel. It was really nice talking to you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
Om 2 veckor, då blir det dags för nästa avsnitt. Då är det med Mattias Kylén som har jobbat på massa olika spel men just nu sitter med Halo borta i Seattle. Och sen vill jag påminna ännu en gång om att ni borde gå in och följa Extraliv Podcast på Instagram, på Facebook och såklart i podcastflödet. Det var allt för den här gången. Ha det så bra.